Oops, wrong one. There we go. That should be me. Cool. Hello. Just me this week. Yulia is on holiday somewhere, so I'm going to have to try and do this by myself. But we'll see. I can drive everything, and I've just got nobody to talk to, so that's going to be kind of weird. But I can talk to the camera. So, welcome to the Low Code Hour. Again, this fortnight, not this week. We are going to look at an app, building an app. A friend of mine tweeted a few weeks ago now. There's a recurring thing. He's mentioned this idea of dial a podcast. So listen to lots of podcasts. Got loads of minutes on your phone. Podcasts are relatively low quality audio. They're not like music. They're just speech mostly. So they're an ideal thing to listen to over a phone call. And often, it's just maybe an easier way than having to download something if you've got a slow data connection or something like that. So so let's see what we can do. We're going to use NodeRED because, well, we like NodeRED. I've been looking as well, did a little bit of research, and I think I found an API called ListenNotes, which will allow us to search for podcasts. Because one of the problems with podcasts is they're spread sort of, there are a few directories, but they tend to be tied to the podcast app themselves. So like the iTunes or, the Apple Music or a podcast one, Spotify has some stuff, but whatever client you use tends to have its own directory. But if I switch over, this ListenNotes is a search engine which has an API, which is free for use for small sort of personal projects and things. They have a free plan and a pro plan somewhere. Pro plan is $100 a month for unlimited questions if you're doing light volume. So for a prototype or something, this is fine. The only thing I will say, it takes a little while. You have to wait for them to approve your sign up. So make sure you do it. Don't just sort of try and dive straight in. But, we have an API key for that already set up. So and I've just been playing a little bit with trying to search. So the idea being we can use this to search for our podcast by name, and that will get us back an audio file, and then we can do something to play that back to the user. So we're actually going to do two kind of workflows today. We're going to build the searching for a podcast via SMS, because actually, like, speech recognition is a nice idea, but that's going to be really clunky trying to tell it the name of a podcast you want or something. So we'll use SMS. So you text in the name of the podcast you want to listen to. We'll fire that off to the search API. Hopefully it'll find a good match. We'll probably just assume the first one or something, and we'll try some nice easy common titles for this. So we'll grab that, and then when the user calls in, we can correlate the caller ID from the SMS to know which podcast they were listening to. This also means that we can make it multi-user, because each user can kind of set up their own preferred podcast by SMSing the name of that podcast, and they can change it. So if you want to listen to a different podcast, you just text in the name of a different podcast, and we change that. So we'll need to do a little bit of storage stuff as well. But so we can let's start off with the SMS. So we need to go over to our Nexmo account. To one password in, get ourselves a number set up. Lots of accounts, that's the one. Cool. And see what numbers I've got. We'll use a mobile number. Which ones are not in use now? That one looks 634,600. Yeah. 007. There we go. That one. So we'll use this 619007 number. I'm going to set up our it is ngrok.io, isn't it? Yes. We're going to set up our inbound SMS webhook. So we're using ngrok. We'll just set that one up for now and go back over to NodeRED. So we need to deal with ngrok. Fortunately, we've got the ngrok Node installed. One of these days, I always say this, I will get around to updating this ngrok node so that I just have a button straight into it. But we send in an on to make ngrok connect. Does it have our auth? No, it doesn't. So we'll just need to just switch out of that a second. Grab our ngrok key. And we're back. So you don't see my ngrok token. My port is my usual 1880. We'll just stick to the US HTTP, and my ngrok subdomain is my name. Oops, let's just add a debug onto the end of that because it's always nice to see what happens. Ooh, something wrong with the ngrok auth. Credential type ngrok auth is not registered. That's a bit strange. Okay, we can cheat our way around that for now. Oops. And just turn on ngrok the old-fashioned way. Oh, there we go, ngrok's connected. So we can do it on that. And then we're going to do our incoming SMS. So, yes, the one, yeah, 007 number. At one point, I grabbed a whole bunch of numbers that all ended 007 just because, you know. What you do when you see, you know, somebody's putting a whole batch of new numbers on the system. What are we doing? We're doing HTTP. HTTP in. I believe nexmo is going to send me a get /SMS, and we're going to respond. For now, we'll just log that out. So that should give us our SMS thing. Let's just get rid of that annoying ngrok configuration. I don't know why the ngrok package on here isn't working. There we go. So we'll just send a quick text message to make sure our SMS receiving is working. 07520 619 007. Testing 1 2 3. There we go. Cool. That looks good. Testing 1 2 3. So we get our messaging is all wired up. Perfect. So what we want to do now is let's see if we can use this to find our podcast. So I started just playing around with the ListenNotes API. In fact, if we look at the API docs, we can see they have this search endpoint, which allows you to just basically give it a query of a term you want to search on, and it will return some matching podcasts. So we're going to use that. So I've built an HTTP request here with a few default parameters, just sort by date, sending, and looking for episodes, and the offset being 0 to start at the beginning. And then I'm also going to send in a query string, another parameter, which is this Q parameter, which will be our query, or what we're going to search. And also I've set my API key for my ListenNotes API key in the headers there, but you can't quite see the whole API key in that, so we're not going to look at that. Now, what I need to do is I need to construct a message payload which is an object that contains a Q value of whatever our text is. So we've just got to play around a little bit here. Let's try that, I think. So if I send in my search is twit, I'll search for this week in tech. Perfect, that constructs my parameter the way I want it. Now, what was our, I missed what our SMS one is, but it's our message.payload.text, I believe. Let's move that over to here. I'll put that in for our SMS. So actually, our input is going to be message.payload.text to become a message payload queue. Let's translate from the SMS. And we'll log out what the original is there. We'll send that off to there. And we'll make the HTTP request, and then we'll parse the response as JSON and see what's in it. Just leave that one for debugging. And that one. Let's just make this look like this. We're going to search for This American Life. It's a fairly popular podcast. So if I send it in that way, cool. Query This American Life, and it's found, so we can see some sort of response has come back. It looks like, yep, it found 10,000 episodes, and we have what looks like some podcasts. So upgrade to see the RSS, but there's a description of the episode, title, image. That's what's in that. What's that image look like? Is that any good to use for us? That's the MVC Pro logo, an iTunes ID, a ListenNotes URL, the podcast object. Has title and thumbnail. And some showing IDs and nothing interesting. Right, so that seems to work. Let's try another podcast. What was the one? There's one that we're. If anybody has any favourite podcasts, please shout in the thing, because I tend not to listen to many anymore since I gave up commuting. But I think Dev News is the one we're now sponsoring. So let's try that. Let's see if it finds it. Found something. Object. That looks like. What it doesn't seem to find is the nice confirmation of the title of the podcast that I was hoping would be in here. It finds the title of the episode, but image will give us an idea. It's found the changelog, so it didn't quite find Dev News. It's found the change. What's the changelog podcast? So episode 409 is the newest. Is that what it found? Can we find episode ID in this response? Ah, cool. Aaron's giving us some podcasts. We Belong podcast, of course. Hi, it's Lauren's, yes. Lauren's, I forgot that was a podcast. So just webelongpodcast.com. So we'll find out if it's in the cool. So yeah, let's see if we can find that one. So it's just called I'll put in We Belong Podcast. So that podcast's in the title. Let's see what that finds. Always seems to find something. I don't think that's the right podcast, though, is it? Mariah Carey? No. Unless Lauren's got a new guest of Mariah Carey on her podcast. We belong together. Search is a little bit flaky, isn't it? Let's see what else. If there's anything we can add in the search to perhaps make it what genres? Genres a good way to search. We're not worried so much about date and time because we're just getting the latest. This is the problem. Type available values. Podcast. Okay, let's try changing type from episode to podcast and see what that does. We belong here. Lessons from an unconventional path. We belong here. Lessons from unconventional paths tech. Okay, let's see what that does. Search. Just we belong here. That looks more like it. Yes. So it found it with We Belong Here. Cool. And I don't know if that was because I just changed to search podcast or the type. This is returning something different. This is finding, this is finding actual podcasts in the results, not episode. So I was searching on episode title, I think. And this is a different podcast, I think. She's here for it. Yes, perfect. So right. So now we're searching the right thing. We're searching for podcasts, and we can then find the first object that comes back, and that will give us a title somewhere, title original, which will be what we can confirm back to the user as an SMS, and who the author is, and create a little message for that. And we've got an ID there for that. So hopefully we can then use that to get the individual episodes. So what we've got now is we've got our search. So what I was doing here was I was just sending in the string as an SMS. But let's try building our response out of that. So we want to use a template node. I always scroll into the searching from the result. We're going to say copy path. We'll call it subscribed to the first one. Let's put in some carriage returns, if it will. And we want the publisher original. I think highlighted seems to be an HTML formatted, so because we're doing SMS, we're just going to do payload publisher original. Oops, my template right. So I get my payload that way, and I'm going to send an SMS back with that. Now what we need to do is somewhere before this, because we need to make sure we're going to respond back to our original sender. So we need to do, when we're doing all of this switching around of values, we need to set something that will survive on its way through the request path to give us our recipient number. So what we can use is, let's use the topic value, message.topic to message.payload. I can't remember what the format nexmo sends it from is. If we look at the SMS format, API reference, is that going to show me it? It's not going to show me the webhook reference, is it? Let's look in the main bit. Where's the webhook reference, Lorna? Oh, it is in the API reference. Ah, cool. Yes, because we now have webhooks in. Yeah, webhooks, perfect. So the sender is Misden. Yes, because we use that for some strange reason. It's not really the Misden. So message.topic is going to become the original sender's address, so we can send back to that. So our to can then be message.topic. Our from is going to be our original number, and the message is going to be our template we created in that template node. Oh, I need to set up my my API key for nexmo. That's done. Let's close that window before I come back. Okay, so we've got our credentials set up, so we should now send a response message with what we searched for. So if we deploy that, ooh, something is really not happy with my NodeRED today. Flows stopped due to missing node types. Why are we having so many problems? Missing node types. We don't have missing node types. Let's just export. Just going to left you on secret for a minute. Let's. I'm just going to export a whole bunch of the flow data because this NodeRED does not seem to be very happy. Let's see if we can use a different one. Let's install the nexmo package. Okay, we can switch back to the screen. So I've just switched to NodeRED running on my laptop instead of my desktop. Ooh, and now that's failing. Wow, I really am having a day of failures today. NodeRED contrib fat. We don't use that though. NodeRED VAD shouldn't need that one. Move that one. Definitely having a bad tech day. Right. Is it npm uninstall? It's npm uninstall, isn't it? What was it? Was node-red voice activity detection. Ooh, it's just because this machine's a mess. Okay, it's not there. That's good. Okay, the Zapier stuff's fine because we're not using that. Configuration nodes on as well. Should be a clean version. Let's see. Types Zapier conf. Let's delete that one. Delete that one. Right, that's happy. Let's see if it'll let me install it. Can I remove the mic node? No. Why does this one still have the mic node installed? I have. I don't have that script in here. Let's just copy this tool. I need to copy something from my other machine. Right, let's try a clean version of NodeRED in a temp folder without any junk installed and see if that makes it happy. Okay, that looks a bit better. Nexmo. Oh, that was all a bit complicated. Cool. There we go. Right, we have that installed. Now we're going to see if we can import our previous flow. There we go. Right, we now have this running on here. Just going to switch over and check. Yeah, I just need to put the secrets back in here. Because when I export the flow, it doesn't export my credentials. Right, so that's running on here. We can get rid of that one. Right, we now have NodeRED running. Oops. And we're going to run ngrok http 1880 minus subdomain submatrix. Ngrok's connected, so now our messages should come to there, and it should send us back our response. Right. Let's see what we're doing. So what was the title of the podcast is We Belong Here.
I'm still learning to find recommendations, but you can ask
Thank you,
for
Alexa.
a podcast when home.
Right, so I'll send We Belong Here as an SMS. Hopefully, except I didn't deploy. Typical. I expect that'll be in my... We'll replay the SMS just to cheat. Okay, I got back a you are subscribed to blank by blank. That's interesting. So what did we find? It found some podcasts. Didn't seem to find anything in there though. Let's have another look at our template. Project. Missing parts of queue. This is an older version of NodeRED, that's why. Have to too many quotations. Doesn't it like there? Invalid JSON. So the little that little orange arrow that you can see coming up of a node tells me that there's something something it's not happy with on there, but now it is. So I inject We Belong Here. It finds what looks like the right podcast in the first result, but it's not building my template for some reason. Format is mustache. Output as plain text. I think it wants message, does it? Mustache is message. Nope. Why does that not want to work? Message, so it should just be payload results 0. In fact, I copied the path directly from there. So payload results, first one. I have a funny feeling. No, it doesn't use 0. No, it's definitely. There's something odd about indexes in Mustache. Sure. And if Yulia was here, she would know what it is because we've had this discussion before. It always catches me out. I thought it normally is 0. Is it dot? For some reason, I have a feeling, even though JavaScript would use that format, Mustache uses dot format or not? Yes, there we go. So moustache, for some reason, doesn't use the square brackets when you're looking through an array. It just uses the position as another argument like that. But there we go. So it will now send back, you are subscribed to We Belong Here, Lessons from Unconventional Paths to Tech by Lauren Lee. So it's finding our podcast. So we have an SMS podcast search, which is kind of nice. Let's take some of these 101 debug messages off because we probably don't need all of those. Actually, we should probably do an end-to-end test. We belong here. So I'll send in the text. It says the message. Cool, and I got back a text as I expected. You are subscribed to We Belong Here. So it's picking up my number and everything else correctly as well. Nice. So that's sending our message. What we want to do now is somewhere we're going to need to store this podcast because we actually need to also find the episodes. So I think for that we're going to have to use the Listen API to get, yes, so we can get, now we have the podcast. We don't need to search because we have an ID. So does get episodes by ID? No, podcasts by ID. Will that return the latest episode? Yes, that contains an episode object, which will then have a link to the audio. Perfect. So it's just get/podcasts/ID. Right. So we're going to store our, we have a dog. We are going to store our, we'll store it in flow. Now how to do this? Ideally, normally we would use a database at this point, but I'm going to try and cheat and just store it in the session data for NodeRED for now. So it won't survive restarts and things, but it's fine for testing. But in fact, let's do a real cheat and not even make it multi-user for now. So we're just going to store flow.episode, and I need to know what the path to it was. Again, so I need to put my debug back in there. Search for that one. Somewhere in here we have an ID, so we'll use ID. There we go. Path copied. So we'll set flow.episode to message payload results 0 ID. That should allow us to store what. It's not episode, it's podcast, isn't it? Because that's the actual podcast that we're going to use. And then what we should be able to do now is another HTTP request. I'll just copy that one and that one to get our latest episode. So we need to do that by searching on podcasts/ID, the API key. Okay, that's going to be interesting because I'm not sure how we can do an HTTP request that looks like that. Podcast or podcasts? Podcasts slash yeah, we could set the URL. There we go. Now we can do it in templating. When configuring the node URL can contain mustache style tags. Perfect. So we want to do don't think. Interesting question is, can we do flow variables in that flow.podcast? One way to find out. We don't have any query string parameters to add. So I'm going to take that one out, So we'll just set our API key. We don't really need to send any values in, and we want to make sure we're encoding the output. Right. Let's see what this does. Ooh, doesn't like that. Unexpected end of JSON input. Okay, what was the actual output from it? Did I get my API v2 podcasts? Podcast. Or did I actually set the flow.podcast? That might be my problem. Hopefully it's set it. Nope, I just get back nothing. Okay, what we can do is we can just read it back out from here anyway. So we're going to set message.payload to flow.podcast, and we'll set our ID here to be podcast. Let's try that. Why doesn't that want to work? Get podcasts/ID. V2 API podcasts. Don't need way too much for any of the optional parameters for now. Let's see what our podcast ID, make sure our podcast ID is being set to something. That looks like an ID. Let's just hard code that for a second. Get that. Okay, that finds the podcast. Maybe it does want to be triple brackets. It shouldn't normally do, because we're using a fairly simple string, but unclosed tag. Oops, did I miss? Yep, one too few brackets. Let's try again. Hey, that looks better. Okay, so it wants triple brackets in the podcast object in the URL. So somewhere we have our response, and I'm hoping that that will contain episodes. Cool. And cool, episode 28, I believe, is the latest one, isn't it, Lauren? I think it was when we looked at the website. Yes, director of nursing director, or from nursing to director of web development. Yes, I remember that one. So that's the latest episode, is the first one in the array. And there's an audio URL. Let's see what that goes to. Let's just copy the value. Let's just, because that's the ListenNotes one. So I'm guessing, yeah, it seems to then do a redirect to, I'm guessing Buzzsprout is where you're hosting your podcast, Lauren.
We belong here.
Oh, cool. Your episode dropping soon. Plug for Lauren's podcast. So we can use that that URL there, wherever it was, audio, as our audio URL. So I think what we'll do is, at this point, we can let's just move that out to something useful. Set message payload to message payload episodes audio. That'll. Right. So all that fairly convoluted request, but that will allow us to basically get the audio URL of the latest podcast episode. So now we can start doing our voice call. Hopefully this will be a little bit easier. So we're going to have an incoming voice webhook, get/answer. We are going to then use that as our trigger to get the episode. And then at the end of that, we're going to stream, and our stream URL is just going to be message.payload. Simple as that. In fact, let's stick a talk in there first. Welcome to Dial a Podcast. I'll use my usual favourite name and turn the NCCO back out there. Cool. So what we also need to do now is, of course, to create an application linked to this one. We'll just use any old spare node. Just switch you over to that so you don't see my keys again. And that one. Slash my answer URL is /answer. Set up the event one because it's useful. Oops, don't name. Go, I have a key and a secret. So come back. So we have an application pointed at that. Oh, I need to go and link the number to that application. It will be logged out, of course. Your applications podcast. There's the new one. We should see, yeah, the ngrok URLs are set up correctly. So we just need to link to that 007 number. There we go. So our voice is now linked to it as well. Now, hopefully, I'll be amazed if this bit works. If we call this number now, I'll try tracking you on speakerphone.
Welcome to Dial a Podcast.
Oh, that sounds like a podcast.
Welcome to We Belong Here, lessons from unconventional paths to tech.
Cool.
I'm Lauren Lee, and I'm all about building community.
There we go. So we have Dial a Podcast. That little bit was second bit was remarkably easy once we'd found the podcast. So we've really got two functions here now. So we've got our SMS handler, which takes a string that we send in to search by, finds the first matching podcast by that, and sends it back as a confirmation. Then stores that in flow.podcast, and then we have a incoming voice call handler, which just uses that podcast ID that we've searched for previously to go off and get the latest episode, and then just drop that URL into a stream action. So if I now try changing the podcast, let's see, were there any other suggestions for podcasts? The Life Scientific. Oh, we can. Yes. Okay. Yes, it's a not a BBC World Service one, so it should appear. Scientific. So I'm going to text the Life Scientific. Let's see what it sends me back. You are subscribed to the Life Scientific by BBC Radio 4. Cool. So now I call the number.
Welcome to dial a podcast.
This is the BBC.
Cool. So it takes a little
This
second, obviously,
podcast is
to.
supported by advertising outside the UK.
Probably shouldn't play too much of the BBC's podcast
I
on
like
our
a bed
screen.
that's really firm.
I need something a little softer than that.
It's an ad for mattresses. Of course, it's an ad for mattresses. Every podcast has an ad for mattresses on it these days. But cool. So there we go. We have a working dialer podcast app. So a little bit ropey doing it by myself, and also kind of had a few tech problems. But let's have a little review of what we've got. So we're sending in our text. Now, what would be nice to do would be to make this multi-user. So to somehow, instead of storing one podcast as the current episode on the system and switching out for whatever is texted in by anybody, doing that so to key it by number. So really, that would be this value here. So we'd want to store that ID, but instead of storing it as flow.podcast, we want to store it as an object keyed against the phone number. And then when we look it up from here, when we switch it out into the payload to get the podcast, we'd look up based on the number. And really, that would be best done with a database, just because then you can have persist your data and stuff. This little query seems to be pretty quick. So we're actually querying the ListenNotes API as soon as the call comes in, and it's not slow because you can hear. I think you probably heard it on the stream that the that initial talk plays back. There's a little bit of a delay sometimes playing out the stream, but I think that's probably down to fetching the podcast and seeing, especially if it's maybe a bit larger. So we see, because obviously the Vonage API has to load in the whole audio file before it from that podcast URL before it streams it, and if that's slower to respond, just going to see if we can see how big that BBC one was. That's the podcast. No, I didn't log out the episode, but we could. We could just add that in there somewhere to see what our response is. I'll make another call for. See if you can hear.
Welcome to dial a podcast.
This is the BBC.
Nice and quick that time, but quite possibly because it's being cached.
By advertising
Where are we? So this is our podcast extra episode. So that episode is podcast of reasonably large audio files. It doesn't. Length is 1800 seconds, so it's actually not a huge one, but doesn't tell me how big the file is. I'd guess that's probably 1800 seconds is 600 seconds is 10 minutes, so it's 30 minutes. So it's probably going to be sort of 40-50 megabytes, I would have thought, at MP3, but it seems to be fairly happy loading that up. But yeah, so there we go. Well, we've got a bit of a dry one this week, I'm afraid, but we did actually get something built and working, which I'm quite pleased about. I'll clean this up and put this up on flows.nodered.org somewhere. Once I strip out things like the API keys and stuff, so you can you can try recreating it yourselves. That was the API that I was using was this ListenNotes, which seems pretty good. And obviously combined with our Vonage API keys, so our Vonage voice API for playing stuff back. So I think if there's anybody left there at the hour, we'll call that a day. Can't remember what we're doing next time. Julia did tell me, but no, my mind's gone blank. So I'll find something. It'll probably be NodeRED. Okay, thanks everyone.